Welcome to another Three Steps to Startup podcast, brought to you by Tech Connect West Virginia, Innova Commercialization Group, and the West Virginia Jobs Investment Trust. This is Jeremy Turner from Epic Mission, where we are guiding the heroes of change, and I'll be your host. This podcast is part of the Three Steps to Startup initiative. The goal of Three Steps is to provide early-stage entrepreneurs with critical assistance and structured guidance for innovation commercialization, from ideation to product launch and market entry. Three Steps to Startup is made possible by support from the Appalachian Regional Commission and the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation. Today, we're welcoming back Scott Ewing, co-founder and principal business analyst in the Appalachian Investors Alliance, or AIA. AIA is a nonprofit that facilitates greater access to angel and venture capital for entrepreneurs throughout our region. Scott, we've done a number of these interviews for the Three Steps program, and I'm really glad to have you back.
I'm trying not to wear out my welcome, Jeremy. I believe this is number 6 in our podcast series.
Yes, indeed, number 6. And this time, I want to go back to what we discussed in our podcast titled The 9 Gems.
Yeah, I remember it.
Excellent. In our first podcast, you pointed out that investors are reluctant to pay for the research component of R&D, and that when investors get involved with funding R&D, most are interested in funding product development, not research.
Now, I was making a generalization, but apart from certain angels and specialist venture funds that take on long lead time projects, I think what I said holds true. You hear investors talk about wanting to be at the leading edge, not the bleeding edge of innovation.
Scott, I believe your opinion was that there is too much uncertainty and risk for most investors to become involved in funding what might be described as a laboratory research project.
The investors we work with want their capital to be applied after an innovation or technology has been substantially de-risked. I've often said that the angel or early venture VC, sweet spot occurs at the point where questions surrounding commercialization project or a commercialization project involve engineering or business planning, not science and discovery.
And Scott, that's exactly what I'd like for us to drill down into today. How does an entrepreneur communicate to potential investors that the startup is a sweet spot opportunity?
Well, going back to what we talked about in the first podcast, you're asking how an entrepreneur can make it clear to investors that a product development opportunity isn't in the raw idea state, and that it's past the cut from merely being a patentable technology, right? So ideally, the project has arrived at a gate for receiving prototype funding or can make good use of funding to launch into the commercial market.
Exactly. And let's focus on what could be quote unquote actionable for the entrepreneur.
I'd say the most actionable thing an entrepreneur can do is to suffer through a rigorous self-assessment and assessment of their commercialization project before they go out looking for funding.
Okay, so Scott, if you would, please explain what sort of a self-assessment you mean.
Well, to start, many entrepreneurs have been mistakenly led to believe that applying and pitching for investor funding is all about showing passion, right? So passion for their innovation or their product.
Okay, sure. You and I have spoken about this before. There seems to be a sort of cult of the entrepreneur in business press that glosses over the importance of executing on a sound business model. Instead, entrepreneurs are led to believe that raw enthusiasm is enough to tip the scale where investors are concerned.
Yeah, I'd say that sort of press does a disservice to entrepreneurs. Investors understand that an entrepreneur is going to be passionate about their own business.
And it isn't hard for someone to fall in love with their own business ideas.
No, that's why an honest self-assessment is important. Every entrepreneur and every business or commercialization project has strong and weak points, right? So the entrepreneur that can recognize weak points or deficits before putting their idea in front of investors is much more likely to make necessary proactive adjustments.
I think it's safe to say in general that showing proactivity instead of reactivity adds to investors' confidence in the entrepreneur and the project. Don't you agree?
That's a great way to put it. The best way an entrepreneur can demonstrate proactivity is by offering good answers to tough questions before the investor thinks to ask. So show me you're well prepared to receive funding by having anticipated my concerns and point out what corrections or adjustments you've made or plan to make before asking me for the investment.
Okay, so say I'm an investor developing a new product. I need investor funding to complete my commercial prototype and to work out a number of issues such as product packaging, manufacturing test runs, market testing, and the final technical specifications.
Okay, so those are all what I'd call development concerns rather than research problems. But as an investor, I'm evaluating the funding application, and I'm going to want to organize those concerns that you just listed into three general categories, and then rank the pros and cons or competitive advantages and disadvantages, which hopefully the entrepreneur understands and can articulate.
So Scott, how do you categorize the issues I need to work out with investor funding?
First, there are the technology-related issues. Okay, so these are product factors such as design, technology, materials, and complexity. Or they're the manufacturing process factors that they include what will be the process for small batch production, for scaling up production, what special equipment, testing, or manufacturing equipment or capabilities are going to be required, and how complex is the final production process going to be. The entrepreneur needs to tell me why none of those issues pose a problem that will prevent the new product from launching. And then second would be market-related issues. What will be the distribution channels for the new product, for example? What, if any, reputation does the entrepreneur and company enjoy in the proposed industry and that market segment? What will be the approach to warranty and customer service? Follow up with the product afterwards to maintain the business's reputation.
So you're looking for the entrepreneur to be forthcoming and proactive as they provide this level of detail in order to give you confidence that they've adequately prepared for the development stage as they've gone through the research phase, and that they've given themselves and their project an honest self-assessment, taking into account all they've learned to date. Is that correct?
Yes, but not all the answers need to be stuffed into the pitch deck. I want to make that clear. I gave you some example questions or things that I'm looking for, but the pitch may simply highlight the top level competitive advantages that go along with manufacturing the product without going into great detail. However, adequate details should be in the business plan or summary document that come along with the funding application, including what the costs are expected to be to settle those issues or concerns.
Okay, so Scott, you said that there were three categories of concerns. After product related and process related, what's the third?
Yeah, product related, process related, and the third is business related issues. And so I grouped them into those three categories. What capital investment is needed to get the product to launch? What are the supply sources for raw materials? What environmental factors may be important? What experience does this entrepreneur have with production? Those concerns, in my mind, all fit into the business related category.
Well, we're putting together a 3-steps masterclass that will go into more specifics about questions investors may ask in each of the categories you've listed: technology related, market related, and business related. Scott, can you put on your investor hat now and give us some examples of questions that entrepreneurs might prepare themselves for as they apply for pre-launch funding?
Yeah, I can give you several. So how about, here's some example questions. Is the entrepreneur working in an area of fast or slow moving technology? Is the technology behind the proposed new product likely to become obsolete by another substitute product that we've identified as currently under development? How confident does the entrepreneur appear to be when it comes to understanding the technology involved in creating the product? Are there new materials involved? And are enough production materials available to meet anticipated demand? Are there several supply options for materials? What further need, here's some more questions. What further need is there to develop additional or related technology to support the launch of the proposed product?
These are all really great questions, Scott.
Yeah, so for technology related process factors, right? I'd want to learn from the entrepreneur, does the new technology require significant investment in new production equipment and facilities? Are packaging requirements, both for the product and for marketing, that is primary and secondary packaging, understood? How are the requirements different for manufacturing at scale versus limited or small batch production? Can production at both small scale and at scale, at large scale, or small batch and at scale, be done cost effectively? Are product specifications established and clearly understood by the production team or the outsourced manufacturer?
What about for market-related issues?
So I'd ask entrepreneur, tell me about your distribution strategy. Tell me how your new product is going to access distribution channels. What's your relationship and what leverage do you have with your proposed distributor? What sales staff is going to be needed to sell the product? What support staff will be needed behind that? Have you identified your lead customer? Has enough market research been done? Does your marketing staff or agency have enough experience with this kind of product? Who are your competitors and what customer perceivable differences will there be between your new product and others already in the market?
Wow, this is amazing. And I hate to end by leaving listeners hanging, but we've reached the end of our time for this episode of the 3 Steps to Startup podcast. More example questions related to technology and market, plus business factor questions, will be given in the 3 Steps to Startup Masterclass on how entrepreneurs can prepare to raise investor capital at that sweet spot ahead of new product launch.
That's more good information to come.
Good stuff. And let me remind our listeners that the 3 Steps to Startup podcast is brought to you by Tech Connect West Virginia, Innova Commercialization Group, and the West Virginia Jobs Investment Trust. It's our hope that you, the listener, heard something today that challenged you to think differently and provided you the insights you need to take your venture to the next level. To learn more, please visit 3stepstostartup.com.